Hi everyone, I'm Josh Dannin. We're in my studio here at Directangle Press in Bethlehem, right up the street from WREN. And I'm going to do some printing of one of the blocks that I have in the show. So yeah, we'll just kind of start from the ground up, I guess. So I work primarily with hand-carved blocks, whether they are linoleum, like this, which is actually a Reckless Brewing Company, also here in Bethlehem, or sometimes wood, and everything is printed on a printing press like this. This is a Vandercook proof press from, I think it's 1950, 1952. It's capable of, doing all kinds of cool stuff like inking itself for kind of production printing, but for this particular work, I'm just inking everything by hand, which is a little bit more, hands-on. So I have to get some ink out here, which is commercial offset printing ink, and we'll get moving. Of course, I always get my hands dirty when I'm trying to stamp ink. And I use brayers like this to get everything inked up. So everything's rolled out manually like this for this kind of work. And then over here on the press, we just apply ink to the block. So this is a block I carved specifically for the show. It's a drawing that I started in 2015 and then never actually fully carved or realized. So I revisited it about 2 months ago and started kind of reworking it. So it's kind of been evolving for, I don't know, going on 7 years, which is kind of crazy. So the ink is just applied directly to the block like this. And there's a lot of kind of fine lines in this, so it needs to sort of be inked up in the direction of those lines. The way that these presses work, and really kind of most of this printing process in general, is that everything is capable of printing multiples because we're actually working with a block on the press. So it's not a one of a kind, it's a however many of a kind you print in that edition. But also part of that is kind of building up the block to be printable. So the first print that we'll do now probably won't look perfect. It may if we're lucky, but usually we go through a proofing process to sort of prepare the block to do additional printing. So we'll just do a quick proof here to see how it looks, and then you can see how the whole process comes together. All right, so we have a piece of paper here. I've been printing this block on this press already, so everything's already dialed in, but just to kind of give you a little preview of how this works, essentially I have a pedal where my foot is here that lifts these 5 grippers here, and the way it'll work is I'll lift the grippers, I'll line the paper up with these stops here, and then I'll line the paper up with this side stop, and then let go of the pedal, and the paper is now locked into place. So when it comes to printing the edition, that paper is going to be in the same exact spot over and over again every time, which makes it, very easy to keep things consistent. The way this works is put my hand here and then gradually roll the paper over the press, and then you get a print. So as you can see, like I said before, usually takes a few prints to kind of get it to fill out nicely, and that was the first time it saw ink. So there's a little bit of spottiness in here, but for the most part, you're getting a pretty consistent coverage. Large solid areas like that are always a little bit more finicky. So if we were to keep printing this again and again for the edition, the final prints all look very even in that regard there. And then you also look at problem areas like those spots down there would be eliminated for the final prints. But that's pretty much the way it works. And then, when you're done making the print, you just roll the press back. And the way it's designed is it only makes the print impression on the way out. So it kind of trips the press. So when you roll it back, it's not going to print on your drum here, which is super nerdy, but also super cool and convenient. So that's the way it works. I can kind of show you a handful of these blocks that I carved for the show. This one, of course, you'll see in the show. And then there's a few others here that are all kind of essentially carved in the same way. Here's one here, and these are all linoleum. So essentially it's an 1/8 inch thick material that's then mounted to a nice plywood for consistency, and they all kind of come together in their own way. And the nice thing is, because these are carved and then mounted like this, even though I carved this in 2018, I never actually printed a proper edition of it. This is the first time it'll be shown formally in this show at WREN, and even though it was carved multiple years ago, it's just as good as new. So it can be printed again and again. But with a limited edition print, there's only that many of them, and then the block is retired. So most of my editions for this kind of work are quite small, anywhere from 5 to 15, and then that's the last time that block ever is printed in that way. So this will never be printed again in this manner once that edition is complete. And then from there, what I like to do is sort of recycle the blocks and start to cut them up a little bit. These blocks, which are in this show, so this is a composition I made specifically to be cut up, and but that goes for any of these. I might say take this block, and once the edition's printed, I might cut it up on a saw, and these things are infinitely reusable because they can just go back on the press, but used in a new way, which gives them kind of future life. Because once the edition's made, even if the block's not going to be printed in the same way, it can still be printed in a new way and turned into a new edition. That's the way I like to think about it. So it keeps things from just kind of ending up in the trash. That's the way I like to think about it. So anyway, that's kind of the long and the short of the process here. So in addition to the carved work in the show, I also have a bunch of other letterpress prints that are a little bit more abstract in the way that they represent architectural forms in space. And they're still printed from blocks that are carved, but they're not carved by me. They are carved as letter forms anywhere from, say, 50 to 125 years ago. This is all letterpress type that existed for the printing industry commercially in the past. This wood type that you're seeing here would have been used to print headlines for newspapers, kind of display type for posters, advertisements, stuff like that, sales for stores. So all of these cases in this cabinet here are full of letter forms of different styles. So some of them are smaller and older. As we get farther down here, there's some more ornate stuff, and then some larger pieces of type all the way down to some stuff like this, which is a little bit more styled like circus type. And you'll see that it's backwards because it would have been printed, inked up and printed just like what we just looked at a moment ago. And then it prints in reverse. So I love this stuff because it has tons of character in it. Like I said, some of this stuff is 50 years old, some of it's 100 years old, and because it's made of wood, there's kind of residue and nicks and kind of history in each block, and each block is different. If you think about like a letter E that's used a lot more than, say, a W, this particular letter would have been used over and over again, and each time it's printed it gets worn a little bit, and that comes out in the print. So for those prints that are a little bit more geometric, what I often do is I'll take these blocks and I'll turn them on their back sides, and there's all this interesting character in the pieces of wood, and some of them are perfectly rectangular or square, and some of them have corners worn off. You can see this one here, if it comes through, has a lot more of a linear aesthetic, and there's just all kinds of stuff here, and when you put them next to each other and ink them up, all of those different characteristics come out as these different sort of tones and shapes and forms. So I really like to work like that as well. And I think that for me, since I traditionally carve pretty detailed work, this is a little bit of a looser, more improvisational way of working because each of the blocks sort of speak for themselves, and I arrange them formally and sometimes with specific things in mind, sometimes also in tandem with things that I've carved. But also it's sort of an opportunity to just make unique work specifically based on what I have in front of me. The cabinets of type that I have here in my shop are different than cabinets of type I might find in a different studio. I've worked in studios in Canada and Ireland and in London, and each of these shops have a different assortment of things to work with. And the prints end up being sort of like a document of what's in that unique studio. So I like to work that way a lot. Also, it keeps me sort of closer to this traditional letterpress language, And one day I may be, say, typesetting something for, again, Reckless Brewing. There's some stuff for Reckless up here. Or putting together a postcard celebrating the White Mountains or New Hampshire. These are just kind of random things that I've been playing with, sketches, if you will. So I might be doing that one day, but then I can just as well flip one of these same letters over and it turns into this kind of abstract form. So I really like that play. And, you know, how that connects to the overall body of work